I'm Nicolette, and today Brian and I are here with Scott Austin. He is co-owner of Olivet Riverside Community and Farm. I got that right, Scott? Thank you so much for joining us today. How are you?
I'm doing well. Thanks for having me.
Awesome. So, do everybody a favor. Tell us all a little bit about Olivet and, what is it? I know it's got some history that, it's making a profound impact on the community. Talk to us a little bit about Olivet.
Sure. So Olivet is a 356-acre master plan community, really centered around an organic farm. And the idea is that people want to know what they're eating. They want to use the farm as a water cooler, a place to gather and talk, a place to share recipes, takes the place of golf courses and takes the place of tennis courts. And it's the way we need to be moving forward. So we're more in touch with what we're putting in our bodies and the people that we're surrounding ourselves with. It's been designed to be programmed more like a summer camp, if you will. So it's easy to say we want to create a neighborhood where you know your neighbors, but if you're not giving them ways and things to do, then you really end up with people that don't know the guy that lives next door to them. So we give people the opportunity for volunteer days, for working in the community plots of farms. It's also, and we have a commercial operation farm right in the heart of Olivet, which is Olivet Farm. We are in the majority of the restaurants in Asheville, in particular downtown area and surrounding area. Obviously right now that's dwindled a little bit this year, but we're adjusting just like anybody. And we've somewhat pivoted from that perspective and added back in now. We have a CSA where people can pick up their subscriptions for vegetables weekly throughout the season. And now we've included that for an online ordering. They can drive through with a really touchless drop off. So it's bagged, it's ready for you. We've got a drive-through area at our farm, covered area, and it's bagged with your name on it. And you can stop in and say hello if you want to, but otherwise you can grab your veggies, get home, and make your recipe. Our development style is looking at the community and the land in which we have and we're given. We are right on the French Broad River. We're surrounded by water on three sides, with Newfound on one side, Lee Creek on one side, and of course the French Broad River. And letting those things be our main amenities along with our farm, and land planning around those, giving people access to them, making sure that nobody owns directly to the river so people can always have access to it, and letting people share in that, having trails out of their back door that allows them to get to the next community over as well, as well as to the farm, and giving them chances to be outdoors and in nature and really experience what we have going on with their fellow neighbors and building community from within.
Sounds really cool, Scott. Now, under normal circumstances, you're saying it's basically a farm in the middle of a community where if I was a member of that community, I can go down and pick some fresh vegetables, or is it kind of like a farm stand but without the stand? You just go in and
a little bit of a quasi. So a lot of times with developments, if you're going to try to make sure that the farm is sustainable and actually has a long life to it, it has to be run professionally. So what we've seen out in the industry is there's a buzzword on, we have a farm, there's a farm in the middle. And while we think that that is fantastic and hope the whole world decides to do that, we decided to take it one step further and make sure that it was a sustainable farm that acted as its own business in the middle, and it could survive the downturns and not be 100% driven by the community. So we've given people the opportunity to be involved at the farm, but we've also given them areas to plant on their own and discuss things with the farmer, and community plots where they can get down there and really share their knowledge and farm base with other people. And then as well, get their hands dirty on the commercial farm in the middle of it, which is Olivet Farm, and just really have a sense of dirty fingernails and understanding what it takes to bring food to a table. And if you know where it starts and you obviously know where it ends, you feel good about what you're putting in your body, and it just allows people that sense of ownership.
So are you seeing any, go ahead, Brian, because I know you're.
No. Yeah, I was gonna ask about sort of how the community works, right? So is it that each community member gets a piece of land to farm in their choice, or is it just part of a bigger farm that so how does that community aspect work?
Yeah, sure. Again, trying to take folks that really are interested in farming, but when they get into it, making sure that it's kind of not such a bigger, they don't bite off more than they can handle. We encourage farming on your own property. We allow chickens in a limited amount, and we want people to have that type of growth. We encourage native plantings, We encourage edible plantings, little yard as possible, drought tolerant type of stuff. And as far as the farming goes, to allow them for operations within, there's community plots. So you really have to be careful. You have the deer population in this type of area. So they'll kind of cut your crop down in a heartbeat if you're not careful. So we've got areas set aside that allow them to have their own elevated planters, and they can get in there and plant those, whether it's tomatoes or greens or herbs or whatever really suits their fancy. And it's in an area that's protected. And then we've also got the farm, which is protected in itself. So you've really got 2 ways, 3 ways if you include your own land, where we really encourage that farming. So there's a central area that's a community area, and then there's the farm area, which is a larger operation, and there's each individual plot, which is encouraged to have farming on it as well.
That's super cool.
I know. Do you see kids?
That's kind of really, I've been very interested in this, and I'm sure you're seeing a lot of well, I should ask, are you seeing an uptick in this behavior, this, grow your own behavior, especially during this pandemic?
We are, and never has there been a time where it's more important to have a localized food source, to have access to things that don't require you to leave your house. And during this pandemic, during the times that we're in, people are really challenging what was important to them and now what's important as they move forward. And we have lots of open community areas and trail systems and a large riverfront park and lots of open spaces. And we are under that new urbanism development, which means really making sure everything's connected and walkable, but also making sure that where we're putting houses is well planned and that we're leaving lots of green spaces in between. So during this time, we have seen an awful lot of folks, in particular from larger metro markets, either coming down to tour or folks that were already interested prior to this, making their decision even quicker and looking at this as a long-term change in lifestyle. And we've really seen a shift in that, in particular since early June, where folks are just looking at, is homeschool going to be something that we have to look at in the future again? Is the ability to work from your home and telecommute, is that more important than ever? And we've seen the thrust from, we'll call it Zoom in this particular case, but Google has their own, so does Skype, you name it. We've seen that now that people have been thrust into this and been forced to make this change, what they are seeing is what a lot of us have seen in the last 10 years, where we're headed that way. And when people were forced to make that decision, now they're saying, all right, now that we know how to do this, now that we're comfortable with Zoom, now that we're comfortable working from our home, it was more important for us than ever. We have true fiber within the community. And in this particular location, we're in one of the most sought after destinations in Asheville, North Carolina. And to be only 6 miles away from downtown Asheville, but to feel like you're in the middle of nowhere, which is fantastic, and still have that access to all the retail, all the wonderful restaurants, everything you need out of your back door with a short drive, but to feel somewhat secluded from the rest of the world. It's really just been incredible to see how people are flocking to this right now. And something we hope they do for small developments like this, something we hope they do all over the country and all over the world for that matter. And we try to be an open source development as best as we can, where people can come to us and say, where have you made mistakes? We're really looking to do this, in 50 miles away or 100 miles away or across the country. And when we can spare the time and when we can offer advice and sage advice, mainly don't make these mistakes we've made. Hey, if we can stop you from doing that, that's our first hurdle. And then telling them where we've really had our successes and allowing them, whether it's how to handle the community supported agriculture, the CSA program, how to run a farm, how to treat it as a business entity to make sure that it's viable within your community for the long haul, and really get people focused on this as the new way forward is really what our challenge is, and just to spread joy.
I have a question. I actually have 2 questions. You mentioned homeschooling, right? And I actually grew up in Memphis, Tennessee, and I actually feel like I live in New York and my kids are in New York. And I felt like we had a very different connection to understanding where our food came from. Do you know what I mean? Than my kids do now, and actually being able to go to farms and things like that. Cause I'm on Long Island. Do you think, these type of communities is a real educational opportunity for kids to understand sort of where things grow from? Do you see people that are moving into these type of communities really using that as the teaching aspect from homeschool? Because I grow stuff with my kids here, and they think it's like the most amazing thing, but they didn't really learn in school. And in their school, they learned how to grow grass seed. I mean, come on. I understand that's how you learn how to grow a plant, but that's not really growing stuff that's any sustainable. There's no sustainability to that for you as a human being, right? So, we've been growing a ton of stuff for years. Do you think
Hey, I could use the grass for my tortoise, though. I'm just saying. You wanna send that over.
do you think more people are going to really focus on those down to earth things, especially with their children now, I guess is my question.
The saying is start with grass and end with mass. And that's, learn how to grow grass. And then that allows you to step into the next thing. And whether that's an herb garden right in your window box. And what we're seeing in a lot of urban settings in particular, this movement is well and good. And when you've got lots of space and you've got areas where you can do it in, but a large part of the United States and the world for that matter doesn't have that. Mm-hmm. So we have a luxury that some people don't have, and that doesn't fall on deaf ears for us. So getting the education program for the children to come in and learn what it takes, what goes into this in particular potato or a tomato or this head of lettuce, who plants it, how it gets nurtured, the weeding it takes, the proper ways to hydrate it and nourish it without using harsh chemicals. And then what we're also finding is you get a kid that doesn't like spinach, but you let him grow that same head of spinach. That's the same guy that's going to eat that spinach because they're proud of it. Yep. And taking ownership of your food from the beginning not only teaches them how to do it, but more importantly, it gives them this sense of, I can do it. And you really start changing those hurdles of, ooh, yuck, greens, ooh, yuck, vegetables. And now they're so proud of it that maybe even if they don't like it, they're eating it. And they learn to like it. And just like anybody, you develop your taste buds over time. Mm-hmm. And the more you can get them educated about making a decision, go left or right at a fork in the road. And if that decision is as simple as I'd rather have a salad than a pile of French fries, making these small baby steps at an early stage and really growing farmers from within is how we're going to get a healthy society. And to your point, to have the kids, the educational component for all of that is something that's near and dear to all of us. And as we grow and as the farm becomes more and more successful and more widespread throughout our community, it allows us to open our doors to the community at large and start bringing in school programs to come in and tour the farms and have an educational plot here in town, here in the community, letting them get their hands dirty. We've got long-term goals for an educational restaurant that kind of sits right next to our farm where the kids can come in and they can go all the way from putting it in the dirt to putting it in a skillet. And we've got lots of folks that are interested in also bringing folks around that, hey, maybe somebody doesn't have access to a saute pan and maybe they don't know how to do all this, but there's a lot of things you can do with a microwave. So you can't discount people that maybe don't know how to cook. There's still a way to microwave a vegetable. Microwave vegetable is better than no vegetable at all. But getting them access to the food, getting them comfortable with the food, getting them comfortable with the dirt and the spiders that may come with it, and then also getting them comfortable with the spatula. I grew up, like you mentioned, I grew up hearing the screen door slam and my father whistling and a bell in our neighborhood. That was come home after dark. And if you didn't come home muddy and bruised, well, you just weren't doing it right. So for us to start this generational component here at Olivet where, your kids grow up here and you maybe move from one house to another to a smaller location and your children maybe move back later and they have memories of finding salamanders in the creek and doing nature walks and growing their own food and riding their bikes around. And while no place is totally secure, we feel pretty comfortable out here leaving the doors open and knowing our neighbors, and it's a cup of sugar neighborhood where, you know who your next door neighbors are and you just can't beat it. And I think everybody has this immediate reaction when we tell them the story of what we're trying to create. And everybody has a story they can harken back to. I remember whether it's I left the city and I got to my grandfather's house for a couple of days, or I grew vegetables on a little windowsill, or I grew one tomato in science class and I got to eat it, or I bruised my knees, or I was in the creek all day. There's something that tugs at our heartstrings that is just born within us. that it's not a sell. It's just showing people what we used to do and why we used to do it well. And people tend to be flocking towards it.
Yeah, yeah. Or remembering all the tick bites you got being outside forever.
Sure, listen, that's just part of it.
This is part of it. So I have a second question, right? So do you think, so we see these huge communities and, that are going up, like, I mean, you have all the ones that are going up in Florida, I think you mentioned Nashville, right? There's these huge communities that are going up in Nashville. Do you think instead of, requiring like builders and stuff like that build these huge complexes, should they start requiring, instead of building like storefronts or strip malls, right? Should it be that they're required to build like a farming component to these big communities?
That's an interesting question. And my background is retail development. So in my previous life, a lot of student housing and apartments for universities and tertiary markets. And I found that it really wasn't where I wanted my soul to be. Mm-hmm. And I have a unique answer to that, which is anytime you start requiring somebody to do something, you lose the authenticity of it. But what you can start doing is giving them options to do it in their developments. And I mean that by, you've got detention ponds, you've got stormwater management, you've got runoff, you've got areas where you're going to have to touch and place and plan. And if you can start opening your book to allow these to be living areas that produce vegetables and produce insect-eating plants, and you produce an area, there you go. She just held up her turtle for those folks that tortoise, excuse me.
He was getting in the wires, and you were about to shut down if I didn't stop him, my tortoise.
So the answer is yes, it would be neat to require, but you start requiring it and it just becomes disingenuous. But if you give them ways to do it and offsets for stormwater management or reasons that it could reduce tax rates, or it could improve their density ratios, or it could change the amount of impervious surface runoff. Those are the ways that we can start giving people reasons to put it in instead of reasons not to put it in. Mm-hmm. And instead of forcing them, making it a financial resource that makes sense. And then people win on both sides of that. And I think if, not to get political, but I think more than ever, we need to come to the middle instead of too far or too right, and take a little from the left and take a little from the right and see what works the best and come up with a hybrid that makes sense for everybody. And I think that's the way forward in those particular locations. And then, it trickles down to landscape architects and landscape people and giving people different ways to do things, not so focused on grasses, but maybe clover is your grass that's out there and it's adding nitrogen to your soil. And it's better ground cover. It's more drought tolerant. Yes, it has more bees, but we want more bees, and you have the honeybees. And if you don't want the bees, then you cut it every week instead of every 2 weeks. But you've got this lush Kelly green lawn that doesn't require much. And it's, instead of having this really needy lawn that needs maintenance and cutting for just your feet, you've got another opportunity that is a win-win for both, whether it be for the pollination and our flora and our fauna, but also aesthetically, it just changes everything we're doing. And if we can just give people different alternatives and another way forward, that's where we need to be headed.
It's interesting you speak about the clover, because I like clover grow, right? Because for the same reasons you're saying, it causes other things for the soil. It causes other environments for the insects, right? It's interesting that so many people, like my landscapers, like, I want to pull that out. No, you know what I mean? Like, I want that to stay, but it's interesting. And I think that's, it's interesting. I guess my point is, with that educational piece, if people understood these things much better, they would understand there's more of a natural balance to having things like that versus the aesthetics.
100%. And education is the key, and early education, where it is not so outside of the norm. It's like kids with technology these days. My 12-year-old is already light years ahead of me technologically. And it's just because that's how they've grown up. They've switched over to Google platforms and Google Classrooms. And I thought, oh my Lord, this is going to be really difficult for them. They're fine. They hop on and they can plow right through it. They can save their files. They can share a PDF. They can download something. And if the same thing was done for the way that we treat our planet, baby steps, making it manageable, making it attainable for people where it's not such a huge swing at the plate, then, these things will have a huge and significant change as we grow. And the children are going to take over the planet. And if we get them trained right and give them the tools early, then it's just natural. It's not even something that they think about. It's just the natural course for the next generation.
Scott, one of the things you brought up before, though, was a focus on, a lot of the country is not in an area where they can, plant their own things. And, you talked about some of the solutions that could be available, even if it's trips or, whatever it might be. But what about folks who are, in the city, I'm in a city area, but I want to teach my child how to do that on a daily basis. Do you have any, is there anything that you can give city dwellers, any advice you can give us or something that we can do to kind of incorporate that into the daily life? If, because we want to teach the same thing, we just don't have the land.
Yeah, I hear that a lot. And my first recommendation is keep it simple. Build on your successes. So there is a YouTube for anything these days. And in particular here, there are so many ways, whether it be something in the city where it's hydroponic based and it's all water and you don't need a lot of soils and your sunlight and you can have stacked in your windowsill, or you can get kits, or you can build your own box with soil. You can grow grass first to get your own soil built up and then start adding layers. I would say that keep it small and get these wins so that it spurs more development from them, from just that desire to learn. And so many people think, all right, this is fantastic. I'm going to grow all my vegetables for next year. I'm not ever going to go to the grocery store. And they come in with this huge operation, and that's great. And heck, if you can pull it off, fantastic. We welcome it, and everybody should do that. But go out there and find yourself, a 2 feet by 2 foot, and pick some things that are easy to grow. Check the sunlight that you get in your apartment. You can get apps on your phone that are solar orientations. It tells how much solar gain you're getting for the day, how much light you get through the window. You can order online kits that come with pre-fertilized soil, potting soil that comes in there. With such a small space, it's not difficult to get good, rich, nutrient environment to get in there and grow. Pick things that are simple, that are short gestations, so you can see a beginning, a middle, and an end. And there's a finish line.
Any recommendations?
Oh, tomatoes are always a wonderful thing to grow. Herbs are a wonderful thing to grow because you can add them to so many dishes and you really get that flavor profile. Lettuces are an easy thing to grow as well. Anything that you also don't want to do something that's so far outside of your taste palette. Just because it's easy to grow doesn't mean it's going to be easy to eat. Start building on that as well. So pick things that you're already eating and substitute fresh vegetables in place for them. Things that you would grow in your salads and radishes and onions and things that you can get in there and do. And that way that you really build on those successes. And next thing you know, your spare bedroom may be a farm. But I pick a spot that you can leave alone, that you don't have to move it around all the time. And people are, trading, get a Murphy bed that folds up against the wall and use that space for something better. Folks in lots of industries have been growing hydroponic stuff in apartments for a lot longer than this,
Yeah, Nicolette's going to grow a farm in her office along with the petting zoo.
But I started thinking when you said that, the light bulb went off. I went, imagine if I grew my own grass for the tortoise and he could just graze in the house. And how awesome.
Oh, what a fantastic spot for him to be in. And you have your own little built-in terrarium in your spare bedroom. How neat would that be?
Yeah, and what's interesting too, herbs, like we grow a lot of herbs, but what's really interesting, because we dehydrate them right at the end of the season. So you take whatever you're not going to use before the plant dies, and we naturally dehydrate them. We hang them upside down and let them dry out and stuff. But it's something you use all year too, unlike certain you could can stuff, but you get my point, or jar it. But, herbs are good because you could use them all year, you can dehydrate them out. So it's a good.
That's true. And then there's a lot of vegetables, your root vegetables that can be stored in dry storage all year, your potatoes and your onions and things like that, hey, listen, we got a stockpile of potatoes that are sprouting stuff in our constantly. And we're pulling them out and using them in different ways. And then you can chop your potatoes into a rosemary smashed potato that's in the oven and it's stuff in the middle of the winter that you grew 4 months before. And you get to look back on that and it brings you right back to it. I'll remember this day in the sun and when this little guy sprouted out. And it's a story. It's a water cooler. It's a talk. it's a place for people to share their recipes. And, our grandparents knew what they were doing. A lot of it was out of necessity, but a lot of it was just homespun and homegrown. These are buzzwords people use now, but they're buzzwords because they tug at your heartstrings. They work. And they've been hijacked a lot from a marketing perspective here and there. But when you look at it really where it came from the base of it, it's what we're all yearning for. And so I would say pick a spot and build on your successes, and try to just use things that you're already working on, and then maybe plant a couple of things that you've never even thought of. And maybe you'll fall in love with something that, an herb, you probably don't use a lot of tarragon, but maybe you will. But then there's the simple basils and the oreganos that everybody in the world can toss into pastas, and boom, fresh tomato, basil, tarragon, boom, you got pasta right there. New York might smack me for saying that, but
Well, Scott, thank you so much for joining us today. Please tell everybody where they can learn more about Olivet, and what available resources they can head to see what you guys are doing.
Yeah, sure. First, I would say visit your local farmers markets, visit your local city markets, visit your local gardening stores, and ask them questions. Challenge your schools to change how that they're doing field trips. There's always a farm to visit, whether it be dairy or vegetable or you name it. Get them out there where they can see somebody milking a cow, see somebody growing a vegetable, instead of, a lot of times the field trips are done just to kind of as placeholders, and making these things count. And for us, it's support your local farmer, get to know them, tell them what a great job they're doing. In Italy, in small places, in areas where they're picking up food daily, they know their local person at the market. Get to know your local grocer the same way, and buy food every 2 or 3 days. Grow your own food, learn how to do it, and support your local farmers. And for us, if you'd like to visit us, it's www.olivetnc.com. That's OLIVETTENC.com. And come check us out. Look at the website. If you're in Asheville, that's Asheville. If you're in our area, and if you're looking to change your life, if you're looking for a wonderful way to live, pick somebody that's doing something close to you that's like us, or come visit us. But let's just move this forward, because this is the new way that we all need to be. It's the way we need to live.